The theme for the 4-day World Economic Forum ending today is History at a Turning Point. According to WEF President, the 2022 meet has happened at a time when the world is seeing more geopolitical and economic turmoil than in decades. Mr. Bhattacharya, what are the key issues on the agenda for World Economic Forum 2022? And what, according to you, are the chief takeaways for India from this year's meeting?
Well, this year's meeting is more important than the many other past meetings of the World Economic Forum at Davos. The number one is that this is being held not at the usual time, at the end of January every year. Because of the COVID pandemic, this meeting is being held in the month of May, of course in Davos, in the Alpine resorts. Now, the subject, as you said, the history at a turning point, government policies and business strategies, actually come at a time when the global economic and political shifts are too obvious to be missed by anybody. It is not just because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also because of the global reordering of priorities, reordering of the economic and political powers that have actually made everybody look afresh at one's priorities and focus areas. There is a complexity of geopolitical risks which obviously have been triggered by Russia and China. There are issues about how the global economy probably is facing a recessionary situation, where particularly the central bankers and economists are a little worried. The Chinese experience of the way they dealt with the COVID has led to a thinking that the supply chains have continued to remain disrupted. So this World Economic Forum's annual meeting has actually brought the global attention back to these issues and how the world can come out of this situation with fewer scars and more positive issues to look forward to.
Karnataka Pavilion and Tamil Nadu Pavilion at the World Economic Forum saw brisk activity. For the benefit of our listeners, can you tell us something about the kind of interaction which takes place at these pavilions, at various meetings under the aegis of WEF? What are the various categories of participants and speakers?
You are right. The WEF is not just about the national government going to these annual meetings and letting the world know what the government is doing in terms of tackling the economic policy challenges. But this year, these state pavilions also, like in the past, and these state pavilions actually bring out the messages from these subnational governments. In this area, what has happened is the Andhra Pradesh has taken a big lead. They have actually signed as many as 3 agreements to expand one of them is to expand its pellet plant capacity, and they are holding discussions with various other leaders. ArcelorMittal, Nippon Steel has actually confirmed proposed investments of 1,000 crore in Vizag. So the Andhra Pradesh in particular has actually taken the lead in inviting more investments into the country, in the state. So it is not just a question of the central government going out and presenting its economic policy package and seeking more global collaborations and investments into the country. But there are also, state governments like Andhra Pradesh who have made a successful foray to World Economic Forum at this summit.
In financial year 2021-22, India attracted a record $83.57 billion of foreign direct investment. What are the crucial factors that the government needs to keep its focus on so that India continues to be an attractive destination for foreign investors?
The environment for the global investment has got a little problematic in the sense that the investment flows have slowed down a bit in the current year, particularly because of the Ukraine-Russia's conflict and also money being sucked out of the system by the central banks across the world, interest rates going up. So therefore, foreign investment will also take a hit in the current year, in my assessment. In view of this, the need for attracting more foreign investment becomes even more significant. The one factor that the Indian government must keep in mind in this situation is how to ensure that the ease of doing business continues to remain favorable And that is something which can be achieved by ushering in more reforms in the areas, particularly in the factor markets like labor. The government had come out with agricultural reforms. Unfortunately, they had to be rolled back because of the agitation. So even in the land reforms, and of course, these production-linked incentive schemes have been created for as many as 13 sectors. But a lot of foreign companies are actually interested in taking advantage of the scheme, getting those incentives for increasing investments and production. So I think on the whole, the investment scenario will depend a lot on these facilities, on the ease of doing business in the country, but most importantly, the manner in which infrastructure investments will take place. And so far, the infrastructure investment space has been maintained. The government has taken a lead in making sure that investments do not suffer any slowdown, particularly in the area of creating capital assets. So these are factors which will help attract more foreign investment at a time when global flows of capital will probably see a slowdown.
So do you think an international forum like WEF helps the country to convey these advantages to foreign investors, the advantage of a stable policy regime, a robust reforms agenda, including the PLI scheme, and a business-friendly environment? You feel this is the right forum to convey all this?
Among the World Economic Forum is certainly high profile forum or a platform where global leaders, not just from the governments or subnational governments, from banking community, from the think tanks, from various multilateral institutions, they all get together and in an environment which is not encumbered by any formalities, they can actually mix, and accessibility is not an issue in such meetings. So it is an opportunity for any global leader, including those from India, to convey what is happening in India and tell the Indian story and understand what is happening in the other countries where India can export more. Indian exports did very well last year, and it is important that how Indian exports continue to maintain its current pace. So for that, you need those global linkages to be renewed and expanded. So therefore, World Economic Forum is an opportunity where the Indian government, the state governments, Indian businesses, remember a large contingent of Indian business leaders are also in Davos for this meeting, where you can actually attract people to come to India. You can look for new markets, develop networks, which are very, very useful in enhancing your growth prospects.
Will supply chain disruptions due to the Ukraine-Russia conflict and the pandemic, including China's zero-COVID policy, prompt global companies to build up resilience and expand their manufacturing base to countries with welcoming business environment and a stable policy regime like India, and give a boost to Make in India for the world?
To an extent, the supply chain disruptions in China can be seen as an opportunity for India to occupy a space that may be vacated by the Chinese economy. But at the same time, that opportunity can be exploited only if the Indian policy environment becomes more attractive, Indian trade policy becomes more attractive. Remember that a supply chain advantages can be availed only if a country has a very proactive, open, exchange rate determined and not tariff determined trade policy. So if India wishes to take advantage of the supply chain disruptions in a positive way by drawing more investments or establishing new trade linkages, it will be important to make the country's trade policy and investment policies, particularly in some sectors where we have seen some foreign investors pulling out of the country. So that will be very, very critical because India is relatively a large market and a lot of foreign companies would like to look at India as an alternative to the Chinese economy because of the supply chain disruptions there. So it is an opportunity and it will depend on how well India and Indian business leaders take advantage of this opportunity.
Mr. Bhattacharya, thank you so much for this enlightening discussion.
Thank you.